Racism is defined as the belief that race is the primary determinant of human traits and capacities, and that these differences produce inherent inequalities between races. The concept of racism is a relatively new idea in human history. It started around the 15th century as large-scale migration began. In June of 2016, the U.S. Census estimated that Hispanics make up about 48% of the U.S. population. But even as the population of Hispanics in America increases, racism towards Hispanics still continues. The media has a big impact on perpetuating racial stereotypes in the U.S. On average, most Americans watch over 4 hours of TV each day, and by age 65, you've watched over 1 million commercials and spent 9 years in front of the TV. And by age 18, you've watched over 200,000 violent acts on TV. There's no telling how many times you've sat through a stereotypical portrayal of a minority group without even realizing it. Latinas in particular are either seen as hot-tempered, promiscuous, and sexy, or as virginal, passive, and dependent on men. She's either the family-loving housewife or the mistress you're trying to hide. The media has managed to hide blatant racism under layers of humor for years. I spoke with a few people of Hispanic background to look more closely at the idea of racial stereotyping towards Latinos.
I am Mexican.
So on my mom's side, my grandmother is Cuban and my grandfather is Mexican. And on my dad's side, we are Polish and Czech.
I am Mexican American.
I do.
I speak a little bit from a very young age. My grandmother was kind of teaching me, but it didn't really stick necessarily. But I've been taking Spanish classes since like 8th grade, so I do know the language a little bit.
Yes, I do.
At the time, they only knew Spanish, so that's the only my language. Spanish was my first language. Yeah, so I think it was important, in a sense, for culture. Yeah.
Spanish? Oh yeah. My whole family on that side either speaks limited English, so they're all Spanish speakers, or they're bilingual, and it was important for her, I think, for me to be able to communicate with them, and for me to get in touch with like my roots and be able to kind of see the world the way she did.
I think it wasn't as important. It's not important. It was like essential because that's the only language they knew at the time. So in a way, yes, but it's also more of a there was no other language for me to learn.
Personally, I don't think I did. Maybe if I did, so it's been I didn't register it as racism because I didn't know what it was.
See, I think it's not necessarily racism. I think for me it's that people are very shocked when they learn that I'm Hispanic and that I have a Latina background, and it's definitely something that I have a different perspective than many other Latinos because I don't necessarily look the part. I don't look Mexican. My mother is very Mexican and she looks very Mexican, but my grandmother, my abuela, is very fair too. She's blonde-haired and green eyes and she doesn't look Hispanic either, so it's interesting. I have not really faced like a racism kind of or any sort of ill feelings towards me because of my culture. Mostly because people don't think that I am Latino. So,
yes and no. In ways, when they think of Mexico, they like when people find out I'm Mexican, they be like, oh, say those little Mexican slurs and phrases like "orale" or whatever, as a joke, and I take it as a joke. But in a way that is racism, but also it's a joke, so it's kind of like open-handed, like to how you perceive it.
I think so. The media is flawed in many ways because, for one, you could take the Hollywood industry. They only display Latino women as maids or like sexual objectification or whatever. So I think that it's unfair because, women in the Latino community are just more than just housemaids or objects of sex or whatever. And as for men, there's like Narcos in Netflix, so that doesn't really portray, the Latinx community as, good.
I don't think so, again, because I don't necessarily look the part, but I think that the media in this day and age have been kind of influencing the way we see Latinos, particularly illegal immigration and illegal immigrants. But I mean, my family is Mexican, and so it hits very close to home when I see things like that in the media.
Yeah, definitely. We watch TV and we see all these thin, pale women, blonde hair. Clearly, I'm completely opposite. Um, Growing up until this day, I feel like I have to be skinny. I have to have like no body fat. I have to work out, and like sometimes I'm like, oh, it's fine. This is how my body is, and it's true because it's how my body is, and that's how my parents, like that's how they are, and that's how their body is. So it's gonna be like mine. But I'm also like, oh, like if I just work out extra hard, like I'll have that idea, like that ideal body, and it's hard. It's hard because you don't see anyone in the media that looks like you. Recently, there have been coming out some more like Mexican Americans or like Latinas, but not enough to have a huge influence on me.
Studies have shown that stereotyping of other groups is used as a psychological mechanism to manage and categorize new information. But these stereotypes can be distorted by social groups, and that distortion leads to the segregating and dominating of others based on these stereotypes. The social identity theory states that people in the majority group are more likely to see diversity within their own group, and that they tend to see other minority groups in one common or stereotypical way, which leads to the discrimination of anyone in a minority group. Because of this, the mass media in the US has a tendency to oversimplify the portrayal of minority groups. The media oftentimes does not identify with the minority group they portray, so they often lack the empathy to share the perspective or internalize the views of these minority groups. So the next time you think about a racial stereotype or see one happen before your eyes, remember that every culture is made up of a diverse group of people, people with different skin tones, hair colors, and body types. And you'll never truly understand how diverse that culture is until you dive in and learn more about it.